They lived like royalty. Designer gowns, champagne receptions, stolen artwork decorating their mansions. While millions suffered and died, these women danced at the heart of the Third Reich's elite social circles. They were the wives and mistresses of Hitler's inner circle, women who enjoyed unimaginable luxury built on unfathomable evil. But when the Reich fell, what happened to these Nazi princesses? Some died alongside their husbands. Others reinvented themselves. A few never showed remorse. This is the story of the women who stood beside history's most notorious criminals, and what became of them when the party finally ended. Eva Braun was Hitler's longtime companion, yet most Germans didn't even know she existed. Hitler kept her hidden, refusing to marry or publicly acknowledge her for over a decade. She lived in comfortable isolation at the Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat, taking home movies and playing with his German shepherds while he orchestrated genocide. Eva wasn't political. By all accounts, she was vapid and shallow, concerned mainly with fashion, films, and her appearance. She once complained that Hitler was boring because he only talked about dogs and vegetarianism. But she chose to stay with him, even when she could have left. In April 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin, Eva made her final choice. She traveled to Hitler's bunker, refusing multiple chances to escape. On April 29th, Hitler finally married her. Less than 40 hours later, they committed suicide together in the bunker. Eva Braun was 33 years old. Her last act was loyalty to the end, but loyalty to a man responsible for the deaths of millions. She died as she lived, in Hitler's shadow, having contributed nothing to the world but her devotion to its greatest monster. If Eva Braun was Hitler's hidden companion, Magda Goebbels was his public ideal of German womanhood. Beautiful, educated, and fanatically devoted to Nazism, she was married to Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister. Together they had 6 children, all given names starting with H to honor Hitler. Magda was a true believer. She embraced Nazi ideology completely, promoted it socially, and used her position to project an image of the perfect Aryan family, despite her husband's constant infidelities and the regime's monstrous crimes. When the end came, Magda made the most horrifying decision of all. On May 1, 1945, in Hitler's bunker, she murdered her 6 children, ages 4 to 12, by having an SS dentist inject them with morphine, then crushing cyanide capsules in their mouths as they slept. Hours later, she and Joseph killed themselves. Her final letters show no remorse, only devotion to Hitler and Nazism. She wrote that a world without National Socialism wasn't worth living in, and she ensured her children wouldn't live in it either. Magda Goebbels remains one of history's most chilling examples of ideological fanaticism consuming even maternal instinct. Emmy Goering, wife of Hermann Goering, was different. An actress before marrying the Luftwaffe commander, she embraced her role as the Reich's premier hostess, throwing lavish parties and collecting jewelry, furs, and art, much of it stolen from murdered Jews. When Germany fell, Emmy was captured by American forces. During her denazification trial, she showed no remorse. She claimed ignorance of the Holocaust and defended her husband as a Renaissance man and patriot. She was sentenced to 1 year in prison and 30% confiscation of her property, a slap on the wrist. After her release, Emmy fought for decades to reclaim her confiscated property, including artwork stolen from Jewish families. She published a memoir defending Hermann, portraying him as a misunderstood art lover. She lived comfortably until her death in 1973, never acknowledging the horror that had funded her lifestyle. Emmy Goering represents the Nazis who simply never admitted guilt, who rewrote their own history, and who lived out their lives in comfortable denial while their victims' families mourned. Margaret Himmler had the misfortune of being married to Heinrich Himmler, architect of the Holocaust. But unlike Magda Goebbels, Margaret wasn't a devoted Nazi. She was a nurse who married Himmler before his rise to power and was later sidelined as he took a mistress, Hedwig Potthast, with whom he had 2 children. After the war, Margaret was arrested and interrogated, but never charged with crimes. She claimed she knew nothing of her husband's activities, and unlike many such claims, this may have been partially true. Himmler had essentially abandoned her years before the war ended. She was released and lived quietly in obscurity until her death in 1967. Her daughter Gudrun, however, became a notorious neo-Nazi sympathizer who spent her life defending her father's legacy and helping SS veterans evade justice. The sins of the father shaped the daughter's entire existence. Gerda Bormann was married to Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. A fanatical Nazi herself, Gerda enthusiastically supported the regime's breeding program, bearing 10 children between 1930 and 1943. She even approved of her husband's affair with an actress, writing letters encouraging him to father children with his mistress to serve the Reich. Her letters reveal a woman completely indoctrinated by Nazi racial ideology, casually discussing the extermination of inferior races as necessary for Germany's future. When the war ended, Bormann disappeared. It would be decades before his remains were found in Berlin. Gerda fled with her children to South Tyrol, Italy. She lived in poverty with her 10 children, dying of cancer in 1946 at age 36, still a devoted Nazi to the end. These women made choices. Some chose fanaticism over humanity. Some chose luxury over morality. Some chose denial over accountability. Very few chose genuine remorse. The Nazi princesses enjoyed their positions at the pinnacle of a regime built on genocide. They attended parties in stolen mansions, wore jewelry ripped from murdered Jews, and raised children in a paradise built on hell. When it ended, most faced minimal consequences. Emmy Goering kept much of her wealth. Margaret Himmler lived quietly. Others escaped to South America or simply blended back into German society during the chaos of Reconstruction. The denazification process was inconsistent at best, and many women escaped serious punishment because post-war authorities focused primarily on the men. But their stories matter because they reveal an uncomfortable truth. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a beautiful gown, dancing while the world burns, choosing comfort and loyalty over conscience. Today, as the last Holocaust survivors pass away, these stories remind us that complicity takes many forms. The wives and mistresses of Nazi leaders may not have pulled triggers or operated gas chambers, but they benefited from genocide, enabled it through their silence, and in some cases, actively supported it. Some died unrepentant, others lived long lives in denial. Almost none truly faced justice proportional to their complicity. But history remembers them not as princesses, but as what they truly were. Willing participants in the machinery of evil, who chose luxury over humanity and paid almost no price for that choice. That's the real fate of the Nazi princesses. Not dramatic deaths or Hollywood endings, but the mundane evil of living comfortably with blood on their hands and never admitting they could even see the stains.